What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Fudge Muppet. My name is Scott, and today I'm excited to bring you the second build in our Legacy series. Today we have one of the many you have asked for over the years, and now with some awesome mods, we can bring you the Shadowscale build in a fully realized fashion. But let's not dilly-dally and get straight into it. The Shadowscale is a master of his craft, born and bred for a sole purpose, a purpose that involves eliminating his targets with precision, speed, and silence. Argonians from Black Marsh, born under the star sign of the Shadow, are dubbed Shadowscales and are given to the Dark Brotherhood at birth to be trained as a deadly assassin. Like many Argonians, the Shadowscale has worshipped Sithis his whole life, and so his devotion to the Dark Brotherhood is that much more sacred. While there are no direct real-world influences for this character as such, we wanted him to give off a bit of an Argonian Assassin's Creed vibe, with various tools of execution and of course a classic hood and robe to complete the look. As an Argonian in the lands of men, he would stick out like a sore thumb, so being one with the shadows is of the utmost importance. There will be no disguises or sweet talking. The Shadowscale's victims witness no such deception. In reality, they witness nothing. They only feel the dagger across their throat or the poisoned bolt from the shadows. His life is dedicated to serving the Dreadfather, and he will send him many souls. From peasant to king, bard to knight, all chosen will be sent to the void by the Shadowscale. But to understand this character, we need to dive into the backstory. The Shadowscale story begins in Black Marsh, in the 181st year of the 4th era. On the 13th day of Second Seed, he was born in the city of Archon. The month of Second Seed is the equivalent to our May, and those born in this month are birthed under the Shadow sign. He was named Alduin Nur, and his fate was determined by his birth. He would enter the eternal service of Sithis by becoming a Shadowscale, as is the custom of those born under this sign. Immediately he was given to the Shadowscale training facility, which itself was in the very same city. His primary carer and future mentor was Nakuma, who chose to take him on because of his unique orange scales, a sign from Sithis, she believed. However, soon after he was given to the facility, it would be shut down. Nakuma would leave Archon and persist with the training and care of her new apprentice in hopes of keeping the order alive. She moved to Gideon with a 3-year-old Alduin Nur, running odd contracts to support them financially. She continued the training of our young Shadowscale here for 6 more years before he was finally ready to get into the field. In the year 190 of the 4th era, Nakuma and her apprentice moved to Breville, a place where there was rife opportunity to work as an assassin. Warring gangs were always looking to have a rival eliminated, and since the Dark Brotherhood seemed all but gone, the assassins needed to make a living somehow. It is important to note that as much as Nakuma was a mentor, Alduin Nur's relationship with her was that of a mother and son. She deeply cared for him and saw in him the hope to preserve the legacy of the Shadowscales. Nakuma's fellow Shadowscales had either died in service to the Dark Brotherhood or abandoned the path after the facility was shut down in Archon, and prior to that, there were already so few numbers. The only unaccounted for Shadowscale was Vizara, but she hadn't seen her nephew in many years. A 9-year-old Alduin Nur would make his first kill in Breville, a dagger to the throat of an innkeeper, one who didn't pay his debts. Nakuma was proud, but she always reminded him that it was for Sithis that they truly killed. Many more murders followed over the next years, and the two often worked as a team, gathering a fearsome reputation among the criminal underbelly of the Niben. Alduin Nur grew quick. By the age of 15, he looked like a full-grown adult. They worked mainly in Breville and Leywin, but their work sometimes took them as far as Cheydinhal, the Imperial City, Gideon, and Rimmen. A common alias they ended up using was that of a travelling mage, donning Nibbenese long robes. In the Nibene, no one would look twice if they saw such a sight, as mages were common throughout. Plus, the hood and robe helped conceal their appearance. By the year 201 of the First Era, Alduin Nur had reached his 20th birthday, and by now he was as proficient as they come, with over a decade's worth of murdering. Whether it be knife, crossbow, bow, or sword, he knew how to use them. He could get through most doors without a key, and if he couldn't, he could easily take the key from the person carrying it. He could make the most virulent poisons that could turn a target's meal into a one-way trip to the Dreadfather's cold embrace. Nakuma, however, was getting old. She was already on her 44th year when she first took in Alduin Nur 20 years ago. It was time for her to retire. However, she had received word of black sacraments being made and murders in turn completed far to the north, in the land of Skyrim. After many weeks of debating and arguing, she finally convinced Olin Nur to search for the Dark Brotherhood, if it still exists, and to continue the legacy of the Shadowscales. Nukama moved to a small village in the Blackwood region and would make a small bone shrine to Sithis in a cave nearby, where she would secretly worship him in the night. Olin Nur, however, set sail for Skyrim, arriving in the port of Windhelm. This is where we pick up the story and start our adventure as Olin Nur, the Shadowscale. Arriving at Windhelm, he thinks it to be an awful place. It's cold, full of dark elf slums, and the Nords are all stern and gruff, if not troublesome and aggressive. He soon hears word of Aventus Aretino performing the Black Sacrament, and this is where you will follow him up, and as a result you will join the Dark Brotherhood and serve faithfully. You will meet Vizara, who believes himself to be the last of the Shadowscales, but we know he is wrong. But we just keep our identity as a Shadowscale to ourselves, for the time being. After you have played through the Dark Brotherhood questline and proven yourself as an exceptional assassin by killing the Emperor, you will fully embrace the role of listener and begin rebuilding the Dawnstar Sanctuary. It's here that Olin Nur would then write to Nukama in Blackwood, telling her to make the journey to Dawnstar so she can live with kindred minds. Hopefully together they can rebuild the Shadowscales. There is, after all, a small but growing population of Argonians in the docks of Windhelm. But what about the other factions and quests? Well, the Thieves Guild is entirely optional and your skill set helps a lot, but there isn't much role-playing to be had here. When you are faced with the Vampire Menace, you will help the Dawnguard, primarily to get your hands on their sweet tech, including the enhanced Dwarven crossbow, plus the chance to test his abilities against vampires sounds perfect. As far as Daedric quests are concerned, you can perform them at your discretion. The Shadowscale is not anti-Daedra by any means, and he doesn't shy away from killing the innocent if the mission calls for it. Ultimately though, as long as Sithis remains as his patron deity, he can work for any of the Daedra. Additionally, the Shadowscale clearly does not care about breaking the law, and like he has in the past, is willing to work with criminal organizations. But now let's move on from the role-playing and into the gameplay. So let's talk about the race, standing stone, stats, and religion. Obviously, his race is Argonian, but what's important to discuss here is what being an Argonian gives you in terms of abilities and passive bonuses. Argonians with the Imperious Races mod have the passive ability called Amphibious, which after swimming in water gives you 100% sneak boost for 60 seconds and 15% more movement speed for 180 seconds. In addition, you have Marsh Dweller, which allows you to swim 100% faster and breathe underwater. Both of these can be used in tandem with one another to give you a quick in and out dagger kill. Of course, the utility of these abilities only apply when near a source of water. However, these are still powerful abilities, albeit limited in use, so keep an eye out for a body of water to use to your advantage whenever possible. Also, Histborn is an ability that means when you fall below 20% health, magicka, or stamina, you regenerate half the difference per second, so it's a handy little emergency buff. But anyways, let's move on to the other very obvious component of the Shadowscale build, and that is of course the Shadow Stone. The Shadow Stone with the Andromeda Standing Stones mod gives you 20% more movement speed in combat, which will give you that awesome quick moving assassin feeling when you do happen to get caught out. However, that should happen a lot less, considering that the Shadow Stone also gives you 20% more effectiveness to both sneaking and sneak attacks when near a wall or obstacle, which will encourage you to take the sneaky route around alleys and buildings for maximum efficiency. So with both Race and Standing Stone, the Shadowscale has enhanced sneaking capabilities, of which you can take advantage of by swimming in water or hiding near obstacles or buildings when available. Remember, as an Argonian, you would stand out like a sore thumb, so you need the shadows to conceal your approach. Now in regard to stats, I'd say a 70-30 split with health stamina is best. Stamina is needed for aiming with crossbow and silent rolls, or occasionally sprinting away, but overall an excessive amount is not needed, and since this guy doesn't use magic, health is the best option. Plus, when you do get into open combat, it will ensure longevity, especially with the absorb health from the Blade of Woe enchantment. Now finally, before we get onto the gear and abilities, we've got to talk about religion. As a Shadowscale and devout member of the Dark Brotherhood, Olin Nur worships the Dreadfather Sithis with the utmost reverence. With the Winter Sun mod, mod, being a follower of Sithis grants you the ability to be up to 25% harder to detect by those within 30 feet. You also have a chance to find human hearts on people you kill, which is useful for prayer to him, but we'll get to that in a second. The Shrine Blessing from Sithis is also quite useful, granting 15% more sneak attack damage, and once you are a Devotee, you can, while sneaking, activate a door to briefly turn it into a void portal. Targets within 60 feet who are not detecting you are pulled in and killed, and it costs 5% favor. But back to the part about human hearts. The tenets of Sithis are as follows: murder the innocent, pray while sacrificing a human heart or human flesh, send your victims to the void. Argonians are most deserving of my favor. So it's an absolutely perfect fit for this character, and do be sure to collect human hearts that can appear on corpses, because once done, you can pray to Sithis and it will be immediately sacrificed to him, increasing your favor. But now we've built the basics, the fundamentals that make him who he is, let's move on to his powers and all the cool stuff he wears, as well as the weapons he uses. The Shadowscale does not use magic at all, and to be honest, using dragon shouts isn't really necessary, and I don't think it really fits the vibe of this character. But if you do want to take advantage of the World Serpent perk, I would use a combo of Marked for Death, but also just use the first word of Unrelenting Force just to activate the perk. But there is one particular power that you will find very helpful for this character. Amplify Lethality allows you to once a day pick a victim to silently reduce their poison resistance by 250% for 10 seconds. This power is going to help you take down those very tanky targets with the same efficiency as those smaller, softer targets. Bear in mind, you won't have this power until you have picked the corresponding perk in the alchemy tree at skill level 80. But with all this speak of poisons, let's talk about the ones that you're actually going to use. Ultimately, you can use whatever ones you want, but the traditional damage health poison is an absolute winner, and on top of that, for utility purposes, both slow and paralysis potions are awesome. It's a great idea to hit that particularly tanky target with a poisoned paralysis bolt from afar, and then when they lay there helpless, sneak up on them and cut their throat with a sneak attack, and that should finish them off. You've probably picked up by now that the Shadowscale uses a crossbow. In fact, he uses the enhanced Dwarven crossbow with standard Dwarven bolts. We don't want to be making explosions. It's silent and deadly, not loud and proud. His secondary weapon is any dagger you wish, until ideally you get the Blade of Woe, which despite being a powerful sneak weapon, it will also help keep you alive in open combat with its Absorb Health enchantment. We will elaborate on all the combos and usages of the weapons, poisons, and powers in the playstyle section, but first let's talk about his very particular look. We wanted to give this guy a bit of an Assassin's Creed vibe, and for this we chose the black Nibonese long mage robes and Nibonese mage hood, along with some standard fine boots, and it's a familiar fit considering his past alias. These can be acquired from merchants in the Beyond Skyrim Brimmer mod, and they fit perfectly. There is also no harm in just item coding the robes for role-playing purposes. They are just clothes after all, there is no unfair advantage. And for that extra sneak damage, we added the shrouded hand wraps from Vanilla. And speaking of Vanilla, this build should be fairly easy to replicate in terms of aesthetics. I'd probably just complete the shrouded robe set with a shrouded hood, but that can look a little funny on an Argonian, so perhaps go for no headpiece. Mourner's clothes is also another dark coloured clothing choice, but it doesn't look like a robe, but it could still easily work for a Shadowscale. Let's now talk the skills and perks of the Shadowscale, and then we can jump onto how all the gear, skills, perks, powers, and abilities function together as an awesome playstyle. The Shadowscale was born into this life, sending souls to Sithis since he was young. He has been trained by the last of the Shadowscales, and so has a wide skill set pertaining to the art of killing in silence. This includes one-handed archery, sneak lockpicking, pickpocketing, and alchemy. Now, let's talk about the standout star perks of this build. We won't be talking about every single perk, but the full list is available on screen. The archery perks have been built around planting, setting up a shot from afar, and getting that single kill before vanishing like a ghost. The perks Long Shot, Clean Kill, and Snipe help you achieve this. Long Shot increases damage by 80% for targets beyond 50 feet away, Clean Kill increases damage by 20% when the enemy is at full health, and Snipe makes it so shooting targets you haven't shot within the past 10 seconds inflicts a critical strike that deals 3 times critical damage, and any weapon enchantments applied by the shot are twice as effective. These, on top of the fact we are using a poisoned bolt, factor into guaranteeing that single shot kill. But let's talk about the subtle option. The standout perk in the pickpocket tree is less about stealing and more about planting poisons with the Brotherhood cocktail perk, which allows you to poison your enemies without drawing a weapon by placing it in their inventory. The poisons you have are due to your prowess in the alchemy tree, which is made special by the Bottomless Cup and Alkahest perk. Bottomless Cup makes it so poisons on weapons last for an additional hit per 10 levels of alchemy, meaning that at 100 alchemy skill, they will last for 10 additional hits, which is fantastic for both getting the maximum use out of each poison and also for rapid high poison damage with a dagger in those dire open combat scenarios in the event you are caught out. Alkahest makes your poisons highly corrosive, which reduces target's armor by 40% for the poison's duration, and considering that the crossbow already ignores 50% armor rating, it doesn't seem like a shiny suit of armor will stop a target from being assassinated. And finally we have Sneak, the skills and perks that tie all of this together, because the Shadowscale isn't that effective if he gets caught. The standout perks here are Dynamic Entry behind enemy lines and Clean Escape. Dynamic Entry means performing a silent roll increases your weapon damage by 40% for 3 seconds, which is fantastic for dagger kills. Behind enemy lines means sneaking is 15% more effective for each enemy within 100 feet that is not detecting you, which has some powerful stacks with our abilities and honestly makes sneaking through cities an absolute breeze. And if you do get caught out, Clean Escape is going to force enemies to stop searching for you after you remain still for 8 seconds. But now let's see how all of this brilliant stuff works in context by talking about the playstyle. A huge component of the Shadowscale playstyle is options. We wanted this assassin to be very well equipped for a wide variety of scenarios so that they maintain silence, speed and precision with all of their kills. But before we tackle the options, there are some basic principles. Sneak, 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 sneak. Stealth is your absolute best friend, and when you combine all of his sneak perks with the powers from his Sithis worship, in addition to the Shadowstone, as well as his contextual amphibious race abilities, you are left with an assassin who is fantastic at sneaking, but in fact excels in cities, towns, and anywhere near a source of water. Riften, watch out. The other fundamental component here is the lethal poisons that the Shadowscale will create. Damage, health, paralysis, and slow poisons are our top picks and have great damage potential and utility. Also using potions to enhance sneak, restore health, and turn invisible are also advisable, but you're going to be a ghost in the wind regardless. If anything, I think using a potion of archery right before you fire that perfect poisoned shot at a tough target would be one of the best uses of potions, guaranteeing that one-shot kill for super tanky enemies. But regardless, poisons will always be used, and potions are just bonuses that you may as well utilize. So for the actual killing that goes down, the Shadowscale has 3 main options. First, we have the aforementioned crossbow, which is the most advisable strategy for single assassination targets or picking off guards. We have built his archery perks and weapon choices all around the idea that he only needs one shot to kill, like a sniper. Set up a spot at least 50 feet away from your target so you get that 80% damage bonus from long shot, and poison your weapon with damage health, which also, thanks to Alkahest, reduces their armor by 40% on top of the fact the enhanced crossbow already ignores half armor. Now line up that perfect shot, fire, and bam. Guaranteed kill. Only the most Goliath of enemies will survive that, and if they do, you can always take another shot. So that's your ranged option, which I'd prioritize as much as possible, but it's a different story when you're up close. When you're in places where long-shotting isn't possible and you're in tight dungeons or alleys and streets, you have 2 main options. For the most subtle of methods, I would suggest using the reverse pickpocket method of placing a poison in their inventory, but you want it to be a powerful one to get the job done. For the most part, this is the ideal way of assassinating targets in towns and cities who are wandering civilians. But when that isn't suitable, the other up-close method is your dagger, which you can get fantastic sneak damage with. Slicing throats comes easily to this build, even in mid-combat. If you do get outed and are forced into open combat, then you can actually use the Shadow Warrior perk to quickly duck in front of an enemy and get a sneak attack, which can be used to get an easy instant kill, but you can only pull this off every 8 seconds because of the cooldown. But 8 seconds should be easy to survive because of both the Blade of Woe and the Shadowstone. The Shadowstone gives you that extra 20% to movement speed, allowing you to dodge and maneuver, and if you do happen to get hit, the Absorb Health enchantment on the Blade of Woe should give you plenty of recovery. But ideally, if you are caught out, I would use the perk Shadow Warrior and Clean Escape to run away and then reapproach the scenario through stealth. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Shadowscale build. Olin Nur, Devotee to Sithis and exceptional assassin. Whether he be striking from above on the roofs or from the depths of the lake, the Shadowscale will take your soul for the Dreadfather. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this build a lot. We finally felt that we could give the Shadowscale the proper attention it deserved. So what did you think? How'd we do? Thanks again. Like the video if you enjoyed. My name is Scott from Fudge Muppet, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.